Hey folks, this is Vince with Dad's Gaming Addiction, and today we're going to take a very brief look at Duelga, a card game for 2 to 4 players, ages 10 and up, with the average play time being between 15 and 25 minutes. Now it's important to note that this game is currently being funded through the Kickstarter process, today being March 1st, 2014. This makes everything that you see here subject to change. Now in Duelga, players will pick a duelist, and then equip that duelist with weapons and traits and styles and actions, different things like that, with the intent on beating the crap out of their opponents. And the player that manages to be the last one standing after the smoke clears will be the winner. Let's just take a brief moment to look at the components and see how the game is played. Now, as you can see here, there are a number of different card types, but I've laid them out right along the bottom here. You've got your individual duelists here, you have your weapons over here, further in we have some styles, you have some red action cards, and some blue action cards. Alright, now the first card type I'd like to briefly take a look at are your duelists. And as you can see, there is a silhouette here, but again, this is somewhat of a prototype copy. There will actually be portraits or caricatures here reflective of the names listed along the bottom. Speaking of which, you have like Drunken Monk, you have Regular Monk, Knights. Those reflect the different classes that are in the game. You've got more classes here and more classes shown in those decks up there. But anyway, each duelist will have red arrows and yellow shields on their cards. The red arrows represent the direction in which they can attack, as well as their attack strength in that particular direction. The yellow shields, on the other hand, indicate their defense relative to their position on the card. If they're attacked from this side, for example, this particular duelist will have a +2 shield or +2 defense on this particular side of the card. Not all duelists have the same values across the board. For example, this regular monk here has a defense of 4 from the front, but from the back only has a defense value of 2. The same applies to the attack strength. You've got an attack of 4 forward, but this particular duelist cannot attack anyone behind him. So you'll have to look at the different duelists to see what particular class will suit your playstyle. The second card type I want to look at are your weapons. And as you can see, there are quite a number of different weapons available, and they're pretty varied. There's more down here, and there's more in these decks up here. But just in this example, you've got a great sword, you've got a spiked chain, you've got a katana, so they're pretty varied. Each weapon will have different modifiers associated with them, and they will affect your duelist in various ways. The great sword, for example, if a duelist were to equip this, they would get a +4 to their attack, but a -1 to their defense. You've also got these little letters here listed in the middle of some of these cards. These are traits, and basically traits unlock the ability to use other cards that require them. Any cards that require a particular trait will list that trait type right along the bottom of the card, and I'll show you that as these other cards are introduced. But you can see they also list some special actions or abilities down here. For example, in the case of the spiked chain, you may strike any of the 3 closest sides of the opponent. The katana, another example, power +3 when you play a red A card. Again, this A is a type of trait, once per turn. So you'll have to take a look at the different weapons and see which one would suit your duelist best. The third card type we'll look at are your styles. Each player will be able to choose 2 styles to bring with them into combat. Now just like weapons, each style will have some type of modifier listed here. For example, in the case of a master, you'll get +1 to your attack, +1 to your defense, and you'll be able to unlock any cards that require the M trait. And sometimes you'll see any type of special action or ability listed here. In this case, you are a master, and that's enough for me. You've got trained, you are sturdy, again, +1 to attack, +1 to defense. This will unlock any cards that require the S trait. And acrobat, this gives the duelist +1 to attack, will unlock any cards with the A trait, and provides power +1 until end of turn each time you step or rotate. So again, just like with the weapons and your duelists, you'll need to take a look at these different traits to see which one would suit your play style and your duelist best. The fourth card type we're going to look at are your red action cards, and these are associated with attack. Basically, a player can play these red action cards in order to complement their basic attack, and usually they provide some type of bonus. In this case, the skilled attack, this particular red action card will provide a strike +3 or add 3 to the attack value of the basic attack, whatever that ends up having to be. The Fleet of Foot card, on the other hand, allows a move action. You may step twice, then rotate. Now, as I was saying earlier, some cards require certain traits in order to be used. In this case, the player will have to have a weapon or a style that unlocks the A trait in order for a player to use this particular card. If the player doesn't have the A trait unlocked, they won't be able to add this particular card to their deck. Double strike, in this case, a strike -3. However, it allows the player to strike twice. If this strike lands, you may strike -3 again after resolution. So again, just like with the other cards, take a look through these and see which one would suit your playstyle best. The last card type to look at are your blue action cards. These are associated with defense. And like with the red action cards, you'll have to take a look at these to see which one your character can actually equip. Some actually do have some traits listed along the bottom that requires those traits to be unlocked via your weapons or your styles before you can actually add them to your deck. Now, just to read off a few examples here, this particular blue action card gives the player +4 defense, defense +4 until end of turn. The deflect card, cancel a strike from a direction you can strike, and intimidating reach, cancel opponent's step. But in order for this player to actually add that to their deck, they'll have to have the B trait unlocked via their weapon or their styles. Now, what you see before you is a typical game setup. Each player will choose a duelist and place it in the center of the table facing their opponent. Each player will also choose a weapon, 2 styles, and build a deck of 20 cards. This deck of 20 cards consists of 10 red attack cards and 10 blue defense cards. Each player or each duelist will also get a special action card which they can place right alongside their weapons and their styles. Now, before the game starts, each player will draw 2 cards from their deck to form their starting hand. Now, one thing I just want to quickly note before moving on. When it comes to deck building, you're not going to be at the mercy of your imagination right from the get-go. The manual does suggest some builds and some decks for you so that you don't have to figure out how to build your own deck when you're trying to learn how to play the game. However, the real meat and potatoes here of this game is going through all of those different cards I showed you at the beginning of the video and picking out the ones that best suit your play style. But if you do build your own deck, you'll have to pay attention to the different traits that are unlocked by your different weapons and your styles. Again, not all action cards can be used by everybody. Some action cards will require a particular trait to be unlocked. So you'll need to pay attention to those cards as well as the weapons and the styles that you're choosing so that there's good synergy between the two. Now, in terms of gameplay, the main goal here is for players to try and reduce their opponent's life force from 40 points, which is what they start with, to 0 points. When a player loses all of their life points, they're eliminated from the game, and the last player left standing will win the game. Now, a player's turn is actually broken up into a few different phases. At the very beginning of their turn, they'll go ahead and take 2 cards from the deck. However, there is an exception to this rule. The first player taking their very first turn will skip that part. However, after that, each player can take 2 cards from their deck to place into their hands and use on their subsequent turns. Now, as far as the rest of the phases of a turn is concerned, you'll be able to play a move action or an action card on your first phase. To do that, if the player decides to move, they'll just simply move their character diagonally, either to the left or to the right, whatever the case may be, so that they are still connected to their opponent. Instead of moving, the player may instead decide to rotate their card by 90 degrees. And this may be a valid option depending on the attack and defense values shown on the particular duelist card. In this case, it would behoove the player, in this case the samurai, to keep their front to their opponent, just because it provides the most defense and attack. Facing this way toward their opponent will only award them 2 attack and 4 defense. So rotating your card appropriately is a very valid strategy when it comes to surviving in this game. Now, instead of moving or rotating their duelist, a player can go ahead and just play a red action card instead. And in looking at their hand, they do have one red action card here, so they're going to go ahead and play that. After a player has moved or rotated their duelist or played an action card, they can go ahead and move on to the next phase of their turn, or the attack phase. And during the attack phase, they can perform a basic strike or a action strike. And it all depends on what you did on the previous phase. That'll determine what you can do on this particular phase. A player that has moved or rotated their duelist will only be able to perform a basic strike, but a player that has played an action card will be able to perform an action strike. Generally, action strikes are a bit more powerful, but the catch is you have to give up your movement in order to do it. Now, at this point, the defender can play a blue defense card to either limit or even counteract the amount of damage that they may receive from their opponent. In this case, however, he has two red action cards, so he really can't do much to defend himself there. Now, whenever you're trying to figure out the attack power that the attacker will have, you have to look at a number of different things. You'll have to look at the red arrow facing the opponent at that time. You'll have to look at the weapon modifiers, the style modifiers, and if you've played an action card, you can add on whatever special effect it may have. In this particular case, this is a shoulder check. You'll need the S trait unlocked in order to do it. The broadsword does have the S trait on it, so this is playable. This is a strike plus X. X is your printed defense. If you attack your opponent's flank, this is unparryable and unevadable. So this will need factored in when calculating the total attack value. Now, once you've figured out your total attack value, in this case it would be 5 plus, it looks like 2 plus 2, that's 9. 9 plus strike plus X, so 9 plus X, where X is the defense value. In this case it's 5. So that would be 9 plus 5 is 14. Now, the total attack strength for this particular attack is 14. And now the defender will have to add up his total defense value. You'd have to look at the defense value listed on the card in that particular direction. You'll have to look at any modifiers that may be on the weapons and styles. And if any defense cards will play, you'll also have to take those into consideration. Once you have your two values, you'll subtract one from the other. If the attack is higher than the defense, then the opponent will take some damage, and that is equal to the difference. And you'll just simply subtract that number from their total life points. I don't have any type of tracker here, so you'll just have to keep track on a separate piece of paper. And again, if you reach 0 life points, you are eliminated from the game. Once the attack is resolved, you'll go ahead and discard any type of action cards that you may have played, and you'll move on to your third phase. And the third phase is just simply to discard down to 5 cards. If your hand has more than 5 cards in it, you'll discard down to 5. Pretty simple stuff. And then the next player will take their turn, and this will go back and forth until one player ends up being eliminated. And there you have it. That's just a very brief look at the game Duelga. I admittedly didn't go over all of the rules found in the manual, but this should just give you a nice general overview as far as how the game is played. Now, if you like what you see here, you can check out the game on Kickstarter and support it via the links in the below description, or you can head on over to www.dadsgamingaddiction.com and check out the written preview. This is Vince, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.